We all know that we are what we eat, but did you know that the same principle applies to your mind? Your mind is shaped and molded by the inputs and stimuli that you provide it with. Feed it junk and it gets fat, angry, and lazy, but if you feed it healthy stuff, your mind gets happier and healthier. But what is junk and what is healthy for the mind? Now, it's no secret that we've all become junk addicts over the past 30 years, in terms of our mind anyways. You could say that the junk diet for the mind started with two events, and that is the 24-hour news cycle and then also the advent of social media. The impact that doom scrolling can have on our mental state is well documented, from creating unnecessary anxiety and stress to forcing us into a confirmation bias loop where we can only see news or stories that confirm our own existing beliefs. I myself have been a victim of doom scrolling. During the first year of the COVID pandemic, I found myself with a lot of time on my hands and not a lot to look forward to. You might know what that feels like. So I turned to my smartphone and my tablet as forms of entertainment that could take my mind off of the isolation that I was experiencing. But as you can imagine, the toxicity of politics, Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, lockdowns, and ever-present COVID fear naturally turned my mind into a steaming hot turd. I became obsessed with turning on my phone to feed my mind with junk, just like a chain smoker turns to the next cigarette in the pack each time he puts one out. My mental health began to suffer greatly, and on top of it, I started beefs with a few of my friends and found myself strobing about this incessantly. I'd think about them first thing in the morning, and then when I was brushing my teeth, and throughout the day when I was working, and also 100 other times throughout the day as well. Finally, I ended up thinking about them even when I was going to bed. So for months, I would feel sick about the situation, but somehow I believed that there was no way that I could ever back down or concede that I had ever done anything wrong. Each time I reminded myself of them, I felt nauseous. I was spiraling down like a jet on fire after getting blasted apart by bullets and shrapnel. And then an awful thing happened one morning when I woke up. As I lay in bed, my wife said the most random, innocuous thing to me from our bedroom ensuite when she was happily just putting on her makeup. And I snapped. I started screaming and yelling. I physically lunged at her as she ran to the toilet to barricade herself in. And my rage that day was explosive. And no matter what I did for the next few minutes, it just felt like there was this volcano mustering up in my chest. And it was just about to erupt with just... My daughter ran into the bedroom as all of this was happening. She was terrified and instinctually ran to her mother's aid. I was making all these sounds that were otherworldly. I remember screaming at the top of my lungs without gaining any satisfaction from it. I cried uncontrollably. I sobbed. I felt like there was no logic at all in the world. I had snapped my lid. Not knowing what to do, I screamed out the only sane thought that I could muster to my daughter and wife. I said, "Call an ambulance." And I ran downstairs in an attempt to remove myself from the girls. Now, the only place that was safe in my mind anyways was just to curl myself up in a ball on the floor, weeping and convulsing in the laundry room with the door tightly shut. And then the police arrived. By then, I had somehow moved myself to the living room couch where I pushed my face deep into the cushioned leather, and there I sobbed uncontrollably without any end in sight. I just couldn't stop crying. One officer demanded that I stop crying at once and face him. Couldn't do it. He was terse and unkind. His presence made me angrier, and I felt like Any chance of a future would be gone if that man had pushed things any further. And then finally, the paramedics came. Upon arriving at the hospital, I was admitted under watch. I fell asleep from exhaustion. And then a few hours later, a doctor arrived in the room and asked me a few questions. Then within minutes, she just abruptly told me to just get my things. She was going to discharge me. I had no idea why. I finally got help a few days later when I was able to book an appointment with my psychologist. I tearfully explained to her what had happened, and she listened with great understanding and compassion. I really needed that. And at the end of the session, she assured me that I had probably experienced some sort of a post-traumatic incident, might have been triggered from an event in my past, and I certainly believed her. But I also believed that I had brought it on myself by feeding poison to my mind. And that wasn't the end of my troubles, but it was the beginning of figuring things out. Unfortunately, I did have another incident a number of months later. I snapped again, and this time I tried to hurt myself. And it was really a cry for help. After spending a day or so in the emergency ward and talking to nurses and doctors and a psychologist, I felt well enough to go home, well enough, that is, to attempt to go home. Upon arriving at home, things were quite uncomfortable and unsupportive. My wife, having no understanding of what I was experiencing, asked me to just leave the house for a while to go and stay with a friend. And I get it. It was about her safety, and I respect that. So I went and stayed with my friend. And then during the next few days, I knew that a shift in mindset had to happen. That night, that first night anyway, I turned to Buddhism. Now, I'd always been interested in Buddhism. From what I knew about it, it felt like a gentle faith that came with life lessons as an added bonus. My grandfather was a Buddhist. I had tried meditation in the past, and I found it really helpful and actually quite fascinating. So I began to search for Buddhism videos on YouTube. And I found dozens and dozens of videos about a variety of topics. With each video, I learned more and more about the concept of suffering. And I soon realized that my personal brand of suffering was caused by what Buddhism called the defilements. Defilements refer to negative mental states or habits that obstruct or cloud the mind. These defilements can prevent people like me or you from experiencing true happiness and fulfillment. Buddhism states there are 3 defilements, and they call them greed, hate, and delusions. When I learned that, I had an aha moment. I had been defiling my own happiness over the last while. It is believed that these defilements can be overcome through mindfulness and through cultivating a positive mental state that might include compassion and wisdom. So by practicing mindfulness, I could become more aware of my own thoughts and actions, allowing me to recognize and overcome negative habits and patterns. So through cultivating positive mental states, I could learn to live to be more mindful and compassionate every day. And that would ultimately lead to true happiness and fulfillment. So by recognizing and overcoming these defilements, I could cultivate compassion and wisdom and live a more mindful and fulfilling way. So with this realization, I decided that I had a lot of work to do. I would focus my mind on positive, uplifting activities like meditation, and self-actualization, and mindfulness. My goal was to actively help improve my well-being and happiness and my mental clarity. So over the following months, my mind became happier and more peaceful. I chose then to travel to Thailand to ordain as a monk, and there I learned profound lessons about happiness and equanimity and meditation. So in the period of a couple of years, I witnessed firsthand how 2 dramatically different mind diets could affect my overall well-being and health. It's become clear to me that the mind is malleable, and it can be shaped by what it consumes. When a person feeds their mind with doom scrolling and social media madness and confirmation bias, you can create a distorted and damaging mental landscape for yourself. But on the other hand, when you feed your mind with meditation, self-actualization, and mindfulness, you can cultivate a healthy mindset that allows you to self-reflect and evaluate situations with clarity and compassion. The key is to feed your mind with thoughtful, helpful, and positive content that will ultimately lead to a greater sense of self-worth and positivity. So, be honest. What diet do you have your mind on?